The future and ancient archetypes are both heavily supported in the newest Pokemon TCG expansion Temporal Forces, releasing March 22nd and legal for play in the new post-rotation standard format this April. Today we'll be focused on the future cards, and we'll review all of the future cards available to us in standard format, as well as look at some early lists for future toolbox decks from Japanese tournament results. In Paradox Rift, we received 5 future Pokemon cards: Iron Jugulis, Iron Valiant, Iron Hands, Iron Bundle, and Iron Moth. We also received 3 future trainers: Professor Toro's Scenario, Techno Radar, and Future Booster Energy Capsule. We've already seen Iron Valiant, Iron Hands, and Iron Bundle all used in competitive decks, while Iron Jugulis and Iron Moth haven't been as competitive. Professor Toro's Scenario has seen its way into a few decks, but it's not necessarily very synergistic with the future archetype as a whole, whereas Techno Radar and Future Booster Energy Capsule will only be used with future Pokemon. Iron Hands EX is going to be one of the most important cards to keep in mind, just because of its Very Much attack that can allow you to take an extra prize card when this attack's damage knocks out a Pokemon. Iron Valiant EX is also very strong in its own right, but it's a little more complicated to use, since the best part of this card is its Tachyon Bits ability. When it moves into the active spot, you may put 2 damage counters on one of your opponent's Pokemon. Every future Pokemon card from Paradox Rift and beyond should be looked at in the scope of having Future Booster Energy Capsule as a possible tool on it, since this card is going to give the Pokemon free retreat and have its attacks do 20 more damage. In a similar vein, we should also always consider Iron Crown EX, which is one of the new cards from Temporal Forces, which has the ability Cobalt Command. The attacks of your future Pokemon, except any Iron Crown EX, do 20 more damage to your opponent's active Pokemon. So when we're looking at a card like Iron Valiant EX, its Laser Blade attack, which does 200 damage, might not be incredibly impressive, but when we keep in mind that Future Booster Energy Capsule will make this Pokemon do 20 more damage, and we can also do 20 more damage for every Iron Crown EX on the bench, we could potentially get this attack up to 240, 260, even 280 damage and beyond, making this Pokemon and its attack much more viable, in addition to its already very good ability Tachyon Bits. Similar for Iron Hands EX, that Very Much that does 120 can now go all the way up to 200 in a best case scenario if you have Future Booster Capsule attached and you have 4 Iron Crown EXs on the bench. Enough about the pre-existing cards. I want to start talking about the new future cards from Temporal Forces. But first, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more Pokemon TCG content if you enjoyed today's video, and you can support my channel using the coupon codes and affiliate links in the description down below. You can shop at pokecollect.com for pre-ordering new sets and finding Japanese booster boxes and even exclusive auctions on collector's items. PotownStore.com for all of your Pokemon TCG live code card needs. And check out tcgbulk.com for a fast, easy, and safe way to sell all of your bulk cards that you don't need anymore. Thanks for supporting my channel, and now let's get back to the video. We'll kick off the newer cards with Iron Crown EX, since I already told you guys about its ability Cobalt Command, which is going to boost your future Pokemon's attacks by 20 more damage, which is a very big deal. We've seen this in the past in the Team Plasma archetype. Essentially, Deoxys EX is Iron Crown EX, and Lugia EX is Iron Hands EX, and Thundurus EX is kind of the new baby Miraidon. But yeah, we'll stop the comparisons there and just get into what these cards actually do. Iron Crown has a really unique attack that should actually be pretty strong as well. The Twin Shot attack costs Psychic and 2 colorless, and this attack does 50 damage to 2 of your opponent's Pokemon. This attack's damage is not affected by weakness resistance or any other effects on either of the defending Pokemon. So this Twin Shot will be able to deal damage even if your opponent has a Pokemon like Manaphy with the Wave Veil ability protecting its benched Pokemon. If you pair this with something like Iron Valiant EX's Tachyon Bits to spread a couple of damage counters around a few times, and then target 2 Pokemon with this 50 damage, you could be sniping unsuspecting basic Pokemon on the bench, even if your opponent has Manaphy down. Iron Crown EX will probably be seen as mostly a support kind of Pokemon for its ability, but its attack should definitely not be underrated. The second of the new future EX Pokemon is Iron Boulder EX. It has the Repulsor Axe attack that does 60 damage for 2 energy, and during your opponent's next turn, if this Pokemon is damaged by an attack, put 8 damage on the attacking Pokemon, as well as Power Stamp, 3 energy to do 200 damage, and then you discard 2 energy from this Pokemon. Iron Boulder EX is probably the least impressive of the 3 future EX Pokemon we'll look at today from Temporal Forces. I guess it's fine if you want a bulky attacker and maybe if you need to hit fighting weakness, but it's not really going to be one of the stars of this show. And finally, Iron Leaves EX. Now, this card is going to be used outside of future box decks just because of its ability, Rapid Vernier. You may use this ability during your turn when you play this Pokemon from your hand onto your bench, switch this Pokemon into the active spot, then you may move any number of energy from your other Pokemon to this Pokemon. So even if you don't have a card accelerating energy to Iron Leaves, let's say an Arceus deck accelerating energy to other V Pokemon, Iron Leaves can still fetch that energy off of other Pokemon, get into the active, and then swing with Prism Edge for 180, which will deal 2 times damage to something grass weak like Charizard EX and take a 1-hit knockout. So Iron Leaves EX is going to see itself in a pretty favored position in this metagame because Charizard EX is weak to grass and it's currently the best deck in Japan. Now we also have a handful of new non-EX Pokemon of the future category from this set. First is the most important one, Miraidon. It has the Excel Peak attack for 40 damage, 1 energy, and search your deck for up to 2 basic energy cards, attach them to your future Pokemon in any way you like, then shuffle your deck. This attack is incredibly strong. It only costs a colorless energy, it's on a 1-prize Pokemon, it's dealing 40 damage, but with a Capsule and an Iron Crown, that's 80 damage for 1 energy. And you get to search your deck for up to 2 basic energy and attach them to your future Pokemon in any way you like. So this card is truthfully going to be the backbone of the future box decks, especially in the early game, but it can be using this attack at any point in the game to do some chip damage, maybe even knock out a weaker Pokemon, and accelerate energy to your board in however you like, as long as those energies are going to future Pokemon. And the Miraidon also has Sparking Strike for 160, which, like I said, we have Capsule, we have Iron Crown, so you could easily get that up to 200, 220 damage, and maybe take an important knockout with a single prize Pokemon. Next, we have Iron Treads. Iron Treads has the ability Dual Core. If this Pokemon has Future Booster Energy Capsule attached, it is both Metal and Fighting type, so this can be useful if you need to hit Fighting type weakness on something like, let's say, an opposing Iron Hands EX. This dual core ability will allow your Iron Treads to hit for 2 different types, which is pretty neat. And then you have the Path Wheel attack that does 60 damage for 2 energy, and you move an energy from this Pokemon to one of your benched Pokemon. Now, that ability almost seems useless when you see that this Pokemon's only attack does 60 damage. But again, I'm going to remind you that we have Iron Crown EX to boost our damage. We also have Future Booster Energy Capsule to boost our damage. So this attack could do as much as 160 damage if we have 4 Iron Crowns on the bench and we have a Future Booster Energy Capsule attached to Iron Treads EX. So that means we would be doing 320 to anything weak to Metal or Fighting type Pokemon. Next, we have a single prize Iron Valiant. It has the Calculation attack. Look at the top 4 cards of your deck and put them back in any order. And then also has the Majesty Sword attack, 100 damage plus. If you played a future supporter from your hand this turn, this attack does 100 more damage. I'm not horribly impressed with this Iron Valiant, but there's also another single prize Iron Valiant with the Gemini Laser attack. It does 20 damage to the active, which of course can be boosted by Crown and Capsule, but it also does 20 to one of your opponent's benched Pokemon, which could be nice to pair with Iron Crown or with the Iron Valiant EX even. And then its other attack, Mind Needle, does 120, and you can't use this attack next turn, so Mind Needle, hopefully you won't be using that unless you're in a pinch, but Gemini Laser is an interesting attack that can spread some damage around. We also have a new single prize Iron Hands card. The Volt Wave attack will do 30 damage for 2 energy, and then you flip a coin for paralysis. And the attack that's actually worth noting here is Ultra Metal Hand, which does 80 damage for 3 energy, but if your opponent's active is an EX or V Pokemon, it does 80 more, so that would be 160 damage, and if you're swinging into something that's weak to lightning, that will be enough to take a one-hit knockout most of the time. And the last new future Pokemon card is Iron Thorns, and I will actually have a deck list for this in today's video that's built around the Destroyer Press attack. For Lightning and Colorless, it does 70x, reveal the top 5 cards of your deck, and you discard all future cards revealed this way, and do 70 damage for each. Shuffle the remaining cards back into your deck. So if you could reveal 3 future cards off the top of your deck, that's 210 damage. And then if you have a future booster capsule attached to Thorns, that's 230 damage. And then if you have 3 Iron Crowns on the bench, that's 290 damage. So this Destroyer Press could actually do a lot of damage, even though it does seem kind of random. We can fix that randomness, however, with one of the new future trainer cards, Codebreaker Solution. This has been translated as either Codebreaker Solution or Cryptomaniac's Deciphering. I've seen it in a bunch of different ways. But what the card does is essentially the same as the old supporter card Mallow. Search your deck for 2 cards, shuffle your deck, then put those cards on top of it in any order. This is an incredible supporter card, but it also pairs very well with Iron Thorns. You could search your deck for 2 future cards, put them on top, and then you already have a guaranteed 140 base coming out of this Destroyer Press attack. The other new future trainer card is the A-Spec Reboot Pod. Attach 1 basic energy from your discard pile to each of your future Pokemon in play. This is an incredibly strong item. It's essentially like a dark patch up to 6 times for any energy for future Pokemon, if you want to complicate and compare it that way. But I think this is a strong A-Spec, obviously specifically for future decks, and I think we'll see this as the choice of A-Spec for just about every future deck that gets built. I actually skipped over 2 other new future Pokemon cards. We have another single prize Iron Jugulis. I believe this was printed in a theme deck, so I'm not sure if we'll actually get it in Temporal Forces, but it has the ability Auto Marshal. If this Pokemon's in the active spot and is damaged by an attack, put 3 damage on the attacking Pokemon, and then it has the Blasting Wind attack that does 110 damage, so nothing really special with this Iron Jugulis. And then we also have Miraidon EX, which is a Dragon type future Pokemon. It has the Reject Bolt 60 plus damage. If your opponent's active Pokemon already has any damage counters on it, this attack does 100 more damage. And then Cyber Drive for 220. Of course, these can be buffed by Future Booster Capsule and Iron Crown EX. And I also want to mention that I'm reading these translations from Limitless, but my editor will be using the Proxies from justinbasil.com. So some of the ability names and attack names I say might be slightly different than the images you see on screen, and that's just something we'll have to deal with off and on until we have the official English scans for these cards. So now let's look at some deck lists for future box decks. This archetype hasn't been doing incredibly well over in Japan, but it has gotten some wins in top 4s and top 8s at City Leagues and Gym Challenge tournaments. So let's start out with what I will call the standard build for future box. This is going to use 2 of the baby Miraidon. That's going to be your best attacker early to start accelerating energy onto your board. And from there, we'll also use energy switches and EXP shares to conserve and move energy around as needed. And of course, that Reboot Pod A-Spec that's going to accelerate hopefully a whole bunch of energy onto the board. The main attackers of the deck will be that baby Miraidon, along with Iron Hands EX and Iron Leaves EX. Iron Crown EX is mostly going to be around to boost the damage of our other future Pokemon, but of course we can use that attack if it becomes applicable. This deck also uses Mew EX because this deck's problem is going to be really getting Iono'd in the late game and just drawing cards overall, since our Pokemon that we have here, Miraidon, Iron Hands, Iron Crown, Iron Leaves, they are pretty great cards, but they don't get us cards in our hand, and they don't help us out if we don't have a lot of options in our hand. So hopefully Mew EX is able to smooth that out, and with the help of Energy Switch, you could maybe even attack with Mew EX if you wanted wanted to, depending on the matchup. In addition to Mew EX, another way that I've seen Japanese deck lists getting around the poor draw power of these future decks is including Gift Energy. Of course, Gift Energy reads if this Pokemon is knocked out by damage from an attack, you get to draw until you have 7 cards in your hand. So putting this Gift Energy even on a baby Miraidon early, or maybe on an Iron Leaves or Iron Hands or Miraidon EX later on, when you're going to need to establish one more Pokemon after this to get the win, or you'll need a boss's orders to take your final 2 prize cards. That Gift Energy can really help, especially if you're playing against a deck that use a lot of Ionos that are hard for you to get out of. We also see that this deck list chooses to play Iron Bundle, which can make your opponent move their active Pokemon. It's not quite as good as something like a boss's orders, but it's kind of like half an escape rope, and escape rope rotated, and this is on a future Pokemon card, so why not, I guess. We can also see in a deck list like this that Iron Valiant EX can be teched in for a little extra support with damage counter placement. It can almost be seen as an Iron Crown EX in some cases when you're able to bring it up and then bring it back to the bench, except that damage can be placed, whereas Iron Crown EX causes your Pokemon to actually have to attack into the active to get that extra damage out of its ability. I imagine we see Technical Machine De-Evolution included in this deck also because of the Iron Valiant EX. You know, you have a little bit of damage spread happening with that. Maybe you are expecting to not take full knockouts, especially on higher HP evolved Pokemon like Charizard. Of course, you have the 1 Iron Leaves to take care of Charizard, but maybe you can't Iron Leaves it twice. So Technical Machine De-Evolution can certainly help with that, maybe forcing your opponent to find more rare candies, or maybe even they run out of them and have to start evolving up manually, and you can take the game back into your favor during that time. In this deck list, we see Iron Treads being included along with 1 Metal Energy. Other than that, though, nothing too special to note here. Decks aren't exactly going to be changing how they're built just because Iron Treads is included. It's just a nice little tech. If you want to hit metal and or fighting type weakness, Iron Treads covers them both greatly at the same time. And finally, we have 2 different versions of Future Box here that I've saved for the end. The first one's going to be Iron Thorns. Now remember, this attack works by milling the top 5 cards of your deck. All future cards get discarded, all non-future cards get shuffled back in, and you do 70 damage for each future card that was milled this way. So this deck is going to be maxing out on a lot of future cards like 4 Iron Thorns, 4 Iron Crown, 4 Techno Radar, and 4 Cryptomaniac's Deciphering. You'll also notice it's only running lightning energy, so you can use electric generators. And then so Iron Thorn maybe takes 2 or 3 or 4 prize cards, but you also have Iron Hands EX, and you also have Raichu V, which can benefit from all the energy getting onto the board via electric generator and Reboot Pod and even Miraidon's attack. And finally, we have an Iron Hands EX focused build with 4 Iron Hands EX and another new card from this set, Heavy Baton. Heavy Baton is a tool card that says if the Pokemon with a retreat cost of exactly 4 this card is attached to as your active Pokemon is knocked out by damage from an attack. Lots of words here. Move up to 3 basic energy cards from that Pokemon to your bench Pokemon in any way you like. So this card, Heavy Baton, was essentially made for Iron Hands EX. It works perfectly with Iron Hands EX because it has high retreat, it's always going to have a lot of energy on it, and you can conserve that energy to the bench. I actually think this deck could also benefit from having the Raichu V in there as well, since it's playing 16 Lightnings, Electric Generator, and these Batons that can conserve most of the energies from Iron Hands EX onto benched Pokemon. So far, I've only done a little bit of testing with the deck list I consider the standardized build for Future Box, and it seems pretty fine so far. It's nothing too crazy yet, but we are in the early days. Of course, we're not getting Temporal Forces in the West for over another month, and then it's not even legal for play until April, so this is some very early coverage from Japanese tournaments since they already have the cards and they're already playing in this post-rotation format. But let me know what you think in the comments down below, and thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video. I'll see you next time here on Celio's Network.